So Abbie, we had a pretty good run streak going there. We ran for 61 days in a row before we stopped. I'm excited about what we accomplished.
I know, pretty cool. And also it wasn't planned, right? Like you started a run streak. I was transitioning out of doing something else and was like, oh yeah, I could do this too. So it's kind of fun to just like let it take its natural course.
Yeah, I got into my head that I would go for like 365 days in a row. So
yeah, when you told me that, I was like, no, hard pass.
Yeah, that didn't quite work out. But yeah, it was really good. One of the things I noted, because I put my data into Claude the entire time, was that my heart rate on easy runs went way down, my average heart rate. So that was nice progress. And I was also trying to build up my fast paces. So I went from like 1 mile to 1.6 miles over the course of the streak at a 7-minute flat pace, which I was really excited about because I'm trying to build up my 5K pace and I thought I'd try something different. So good thing during the summer.
That's really cool.
Ran every day for more than 2 months in the heat down here in Texas, and even on vacation we worked it in.
No, I agree. I mean, that's amazing in terms of some of your stuff. I actually plugged my stuff into Claude. I hadn't been doing, like, I was literally just like, oh, I want to keep running in between finishing this training cycle and starting a new one. So I hadn't got any plans. I was just like, I'll run what I feel like running. But I did plug it into Claude the other day after you mentioned about yours. And what it showed for me was that my heart rate stayed the same. So around 130 on easy runs, but my pace increased by 30 seconds at the same heart rate.
Yeah. So
really
adaptations. Cool. We recommend the run streak. Just be careful about making sure that you're getting enough rest. That was ultimately why I ended it, because I noticed that I was sort of draining my body battery, so to speak, throughout that final week. And I had a trip to go visit you with the kids, and I was exhausted. So while I wanted to run the Brooklyn Bridge, I thought, you know what? I'm just going to rest, and it was fine.
Yeah. Do it another time, huh?
Yeah. So there you go. Run streak. Try it out sometime. See how it works for you.
Welcome to Practically Fit, Real Fitness Over 40. I'm Abbie.
And I'm Alex.
And today we're going to talk about alcohol and how it can impact your fitness routine and your general sense of well-being, especially as you age.
Yeah, that's right, Abbie. And we'll share some of our thoughts and stories on alcohol as it relates to fitness and what we've experienced, and look at what the research has to say about alcohol and exercise. I will warn you ahead of time, we got a lot of studies in the show, but I think it's really fun to talk about some of these because there's some pretty startling things. I will say right off the bat, I was shocked by one of the studies that I found when I was doing research for this episode, and it covered the topic that we're about to talk about from an aspect I hadn't really considered, but it made total sense the more I thought about it. It's just one of those things where you think, oh yeah, that makes sense. So we'll talk about that study more in a moment.
Yeah, but first, we're kicking off today's show with a new segment, and we're calling it the warm-up.
Yeah, so the warm-up, get it? It's like a warm-up for the show. It's a fitness-related podcast.
It wasn't so complicated that we couldn't get the idea.
We're going to warm up by going through news stories, and it'll be fun and engaging. So yeah, I've got some headlines here. I love reading the news, and I enjoy reading news about fitness. And for those of you who follow the fitness world, you know there's no shortage of articles on a weekly basis that come out about fitness and fitness adjacent topics. And oftentimes I find things about them quite funny. So we're going to go through some headlines today and talk about it. The first one comes from USA Today, one of the two physical newspapers that we received to our house. And the reason we received this newspaper is not for its amazing news coverage, but because
it has really nice puzzles.
Abbie likes to do crossword puzzles, so it's an affordable way to do that.
Actually, on health and fitness, that's very good for you in terms of longevity. Good proof that Sudoku and crosswords are good for your mental fitness.
So plug for USA Today's crossword puzzles and Sudoku. Also, I like their sports. So. But this article is really, it's one of my favorite articles that I've seen this year. The headline is "Coffee May Help Heart Health Up to 5 Cups a Day, Experts Say." So I read this article and got really excited because I'm an avid coffee drinker.
Yeah, you were just looking for something to prove your habit is good for you.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that in a moment. So here's a quote from the article. It says, "Most coffee drinkers can relax about their daily brew, according to a new scientific statement." So this is just a statement from the American Heart Association on caffeine and heart health. The statement finds that up to 400 milligrams of caffeine a day, 400, roughly 3 to 5 8-ounce cups of regular black coffee, is generally safe for most adults and may be linked to a lower risk of heart disease, heart failure, stroke, and type 2 diabetes.
I would underline generally and may in that statement.
Well, I found this to be good news for those of us who worry about our blood pressure and things of that nature, or who have that running in our family. 400 milligrams of caffeine a day, that's a good amount of caffeine. That's more than I have on a daily basis.
The guy who has a pint of coffee in the morning?
No, it's cold brew, and I have a glass of cold brew mixed with almond milk.
It's a Guinness glass of cold brew.
It's not full. And I will note, once I saw this article about a week ago, I had been cutting back to 1 cup of coffee, my cold brew in the mornings, and that was really it. And now I'm just like, you know what? I'm going back to 2 cups a day after reading this. So
the influence.
Yeah, it's good. Here's a quote from Dr. Amish Mehta, a cardiologist with Allegheny Health Network, in this article. He says, "Really, you want to drink up to 5 cups of coffee a day at most, and keep an eye on what you're putting in it. Try to minimize cream, sugar, and flavor additives that add extra calories and sweeteners, and be careful with the energy drinks." He also notes that a 16-ounce energy drink can have roughly twice the caffeine of a cup of coffee and has been shown to cause sudden spikes in blood pressure when consumed in higher volumes, especially among younger people who may mix them with other drinks.
AKA alcohol.
Yeah. So a thing I take away here too, when I talk about coffee, I'm having almost no calories. Like the cold brew, I put almond milk in, kind of a splash of almond milk. Other times I just drink black coffee. Occasionally I'll get a peppermint sweetener or something in my cold brew if I go to the dreaded Starbucks. But I
can't remember.
This is not licensed for people to go out and just pound those giant Starbucks drinks, or even worse, the Dutch Brothers things. I mean,
oh my God, do you remember when we looked up the calories in those?
Calories and caffeine. I think you could surpass 400 milligrams with some of these drinks that they're selling nowadays. So be careful about that. It's just saying 3 to 5 normal sized cups of black coffee a day are fine for you. And they go on to say, for now, experts say the new guidance should be seen as reassurance, not a free pass to chug caffeine all day.
See, Alex took it exactly the other way.
I'm chugging caffeine all day. I had 2 cups. The AHA statement stresses that people with certain conditions, including uncontrolled high blood pressure, heart rhythm problems, or pregnancy, may need stricter limits and should talk with their healthcare providers to learn what's safe. And I just want to say there, yes, I have high blood pressure, hereditary, but it's not uncontrolled. It's controlled by medication. So
yeah, and also, you've been a coffee drinker your whole adult life, right? I also think it's different.
Since my late 20s.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah.
So I think it's different if you're introducing it, or just what your body does. I don't drink a lot of coffee. And I find I've had occasions where it really does make my heart race, or I just don't like the feeling of it. So I generally avoid too much caffeine.
Yeah. So there you go. Good news for us coffee drinkers out there. Tea drinkers like Abbie, the Brits, less concerned with this news.
You can definitely have 6 to 8 cups of tea a day.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to the next story. This one comes from Wired magazine, as we used to call it when I was younger. And it's got just a really entertaining headline to me. The headline is, "Using AI for just 10 minutes might make you lazy and dumb," a study shows.
Wow. Talk about being direct.
Do you think they wrote that headline with AI?
No, because AI wouldn't have said that about itself.
AI inception. So the article says, using AI chatbots for even just 10 minutes a day may have a shockingly negative impact on people's ability to think and problem solve, according to a new study from researchers at Carnegie Mellon, MIT, Oxford, and UCLA.
Some pretty big hitters in that.
It's quite the collection of researchers there. Apparently, as part of the study, researchers tasked people with solving various problems, including simple fractions and reading comprehension through an online platform that paid them for their work. Some participants were given access to an AI assistant capable of solving the problem autonomously. When the AI helper was suddenly taken away, these people were significantly more likely to give up on the problem or flub their answers. The study suggests that widespread use of AI might boost productivity at the expense of developing foundational problem-solving skills, or as the headline put it, it might make the economy better, but make you dumber.
That's really interesting because it kind of feels like the training wheels thing. Like if you have training wheels on for too long, you mentally become reliant on them, and so that idea of they're relying on the AI assistants and assuming that they can't do it themselves. Because the thing that jumped out to me was kind of the give up bit in there, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, well, there's an expert who's quoted in this article, and I'm just going to paraphrase. He basically suggests that AI should help teach you to solve a problem rather than solve the problem for you, which doesn't that sort of...
I thought the idea of AI was that it could consume huge amounts of data that you can't consume, and it can do things that it can do the solving for you.
Yeah, I was just imagining this guy showing up at Anthropic or OpenAI and being like, hey guys, I've got an idea. We should really make these tools help humans solve problems rather than solve it for them. And they're just laughing him out of the room. So not surprising to me, though. Just having observed people using AI in the wild, it's I suspect that it's going to result in people losing some of their cognitive skills, and we'll be living in idiocracy sooner rather than later. So
yeah, I worry about critical thinking.
Exactly. Okay, final headline of the warm-up. It comes from Men's Health, my favorite men's health-related magazine from the 1990s and early 2000s, which still has a lot of online content. The headline is, should you megadose creatine? Some wellness influencers say we should now take 5 times what we're taking now. Here's the real scoop. Yeah.
Why is everything mega dosing or microdosing? Can't we just dose?
It's the Ozempic thing, right? That's what's created that idea of megadosing and microdosing, and I don't know. I think it's just new buzz words.
100%.
Yeah. So this one's about creatine. I've been taking creatine here recently. I started up again. I hadn't taken it since my 20s, really. So I'm not sure how it's been impacting me. It's kind of coincided with when we were doing the run streak too. It's been the past couple of months. So I have felt more energetic during the days, but I've also been running early in the morning a lot of days. So jury's out on that. But here's what the article has to say about megadosing creatine. This emerging science has wellness influencers worked up. Andrew Huberman, PhD, has excitedly, well for him, labeled creatine as, quote, vitally important for the forebrain, the part responsible for planning, action, and rule setting. So if you didn't know that you had a forebrain. Gary Brecka has posted that creatine is, quote, amazing for cognitive function. Dave Asprey has said the nutrient is important to the, quote, world of consciousness. Some influencers are even suggesting taking as much as 25 grams of creatine daily. And I can tell you, I'm taking 5 milligrams right now, which is just like a normal dose. So
5 milligrams as opposed to
5 grams.
I was going to say
this is in grams.
This is really microdosing.
Yeah, no, I got my measures confused there. 5 grams, but they're suggesting taking as much as 25 grams daily. So
wow.
Yeah, I've like I said, I haven't taken it since I was younger, and my buddy and I used to take it for our strength training.
This story.
You don't?
know I remember this story. It's hilarious.
Yeah, so it's funny because they're talking about megadosing. Back then, creatine, like there was no talk of megadosing, but the big thing was that there was liquid creatine. So normally it's a powder, right? But there was a company that developed liquid creatine
deliberately to sell it to like men.
And it was in this vial. Did y'all have GNC in the UK? I don't think so. So
no. We had something called Holland and Barrett, which was like you could go and get vitamins and like healthy stuff.
Well, imagine two broke college kids going into the GNC mega store, which was just like Vitamin Shop or whatever here in the US. And we go to get this liquid creatine because somebody else had told us about, I'm using this liquid creatine. It's amazing. Things spread by word of mouth.
Yeah.
So we go to the store and I kid you not, the creatine is in a glass box. Like they had to unlock the box.
God, the marketing behind this.
Oh, it makes you you're like, oh, this is not just any normal creatine. This is like being stored in a special container that has to be unlocked.
Superman or something.
Oh, yeah, it appears before you, the liquid creatine. So we bought this. We went halfsies, which made it more affordable, which I think it was like $40. So $20 each of us. Shout out to Landry. He'll remember this story.
Oh my God.
We immediately go back to campus, go to the gym, megadose. We megadose the liquid creatine and we're like doing bench press. And it's like, oh, I can feel it. I'm getting extra reps here. It's fast acting. It's immediate. Yeah. So that's my fun creatine story. But let's go back to the article. Nobody wants to hear about that. Despite this talk of megadosing, the article says, not so fast. Darren Candow, PhD, a professor at the University of Regina, or is it Regina, in Saskatchewan, Canada, has published roughly 100 scientific studies on creatine.
He's the creatine guy.
This guy does nothing but study creatine, which is truly amazing. And he says that taking super doses of 20 grams of creatine or higher for either physical or mental benefit is, quote, overhyped and very context specific. So now we're starting to undermine the entire premise of the article. One thing to remember about creatine, too, is that people used to think, and I used to hear this when I was younger, like you didn't want to take too much of it because it could damage your kidneys and you had to be really careful. But apparently, Mr. Candow, PhD, along with his colleague Forbes, have published a study this year showing that at doses of 10 grams, long-term creatine supplementation is safe. Although they haven't studied this in terms of brain health yet. It's just really around, does it harm your organs? And Candow himself says, I personally take 10 grams a day as that dose likely checks all the boxes for muscle, bone, and brain. And I'll share this other quote from the article from his friend Forbes, who says there is research showing that creatine can, quote, change the geometry of bones to make them stronger. So that's cool. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's
so it's
crazy.
not just, helping with your muscle recovery. It can help your bones. So again, this is something you definitely want to consider as you're aging because as more comes out on this, it seems to be really beneficial. But the key thing about that is just taking it won't help your bones. You have to combine it with strength training. But the funny thing is they go through all this in the article and then come around to say at the end, oh, you know what? 5 grams a day is good. So
yeah, and you don't need to go and buy a liquid one that is unlocked in a cabinet.
Again, that may have been the key to extra reps on the bench press. But my takeaway from this is like, if you're taking a normal dose of 5 grams of creatine a day, you're good. So I thought that was an interesting article. We'd love to hear from you. If you're taking creatine, shoot us an email at alex@practically.fit and we'll share your thoughts on the subject on the next podcast. But I thought that was a fun article to wrap up the warm-up with.
That is significantly longer than a warm-up that we normally do before any exercise. But thanks, Alex. What fun. But now we're going to transition to the main topic of the podcast today, which is alcohol and fitness. On an earlier episode, we talked about dad and mum bods. And one of the things that we touched on was just about how alcohol can affect you, especially as you age, as you hit your 40s, 50s, and 60s, and some of the biomolecular shifts that occur in your body, including with molecules related to alcohol. So we thought it'd be interesting to explore this. And we've in the past done a couple of different things around like dry January. We did dry October, a couple, what do they call it? Stoptober or something like that, right? And I know, Alex, you've been talking about doing dry August or dry September. I'm going to do a half marathon in December. So I will probably like really cut back on, not that we drink loads, but really cut back on alcohol as I'm training for that.
I will say so far, I have been highly successful with dry August.
It's July, babes.
No, it's August 1st today. So I'm killing it on dry August.
All right, okay.
We're recording this at noon on August 1st.
Okay, so. I hadn't noticed that we'd clicked over that. Okay, 5 hours.
There was talk of going to a distillery this afternoon.
Yeah, exactly. So. You're doing really well. You talked about going to a distillery or a vineyard.
Yeah.
So both of those would be excellent when you're on a month of dry. But yeah, so we're interested in both the science about this and also practically what we've experienced ourselves. So there was a study we cited last time that we touched on this in the Dad and Mum Bob episode, where we said that in that study, they noted changes to how your body metabolizes alcohol in your mid-40s, which they said was, quote, a result from an uptick in alcohol consumption in people's mid-40s, often a stressful period of life. So that got us to thinking, how has our alcohol consumption changed over the course of our life? And how does alcohol affect our fitness now that we're in that range of 40s to 60s?
Yeah. So I want to start up top on this with that study that I mentioned in the intro that I found really surprising. And I found all this information. It was actually a meta study that looks, a meta study is something where they take a bunch of literature from a variety of studies and look for trends and all on a similar topic. So this is around alcohol and exercise. It's actually from 2015 from the journal Psychiatry, and it's called Exercise and Alcohol Consumption: What We Know, What We Need to Know, and Why It Is Important. So perfect article for this podcast. The most interesting thing, there's a subheader in this study that says considerable evidence indicates that physical activity and alcohol intake are positively related. So that means that people who exercise more drink more. And, it makes total sense. Like, I hadn't thought about it that much until I read this study. One of the first things the study mentions is there's a correlation between like high-level sports teams and alcohol, like celebrating their wins. So they reward themselves with alcohol. But it goes way deeper than that. They cite some studies that really dig into the correlation between activity and alcohol consumption outside of sports. Like Abbie and I were talking about this the other day. We watched one of those untold documentaries on Netflix about the English footballer Jamie Vardy. Really amazing story. He came up basically from nothing, from the lowest level of English football, rose like something like 9 tiers of football to play in the Premier League and win the title with Leicester City, who had never won before and complete underdog. But he had, it talked about his drinking in that.
Yeah, like
documentary.
He made his own vodka drink, putting Skittles in with a liter bottle of vodka.
Right. Super talented athlete. And it dug into like drinking and footballs, as you call it in England football. Here in American football, you've always had that stereotype too of like college football players going out and partying all the time.
Well, we also watched another untold documentary on Johnny
Football. Exactly. Yeah, very relevant to this podcast. But so that's a dynamic that's mentioned, but they go beyond, college sports, so to speak. And they talk about another study. One of the first indications of a link between activity and alcohol consumption that assessed responses from more than 40,000 adults was this national survey. And this survey found that compared to abstainers, moderate drinkers, so 4 to 7 drinks weekly for females and 8 to 14 for males, were twice as likely to be physically active. And then, moreover, as the intensity of activity increased, so did the strength of the association with alcohol consumption. More recently, French and colleagues, so some other folks doing a survey, surveyed responses from over 230,000 American adults and also found that drinking was associated with an increased probability of exercising. So listen to these numbers. The relationship held up among heavy drinkers more than 46 drinks in the past month for females and more than 76 for males. My math is not so good, but that's like more than 15 drinks a week for males.
Yeah, but I'm assuming it's actually, what would be interesting is I'm assuming that's units of alcohol, which actually is a lot less than you think. Like if you look at like 1 unit of alcohol for wine is not what you get poured if you go to a bar, right? Like, especially when they do the like, would you like a large drink? That's probably like
Right.
3 or 4 units of alcohol, but still like significantly heavy. And it is interesting, whether there is some of that psychological aspect that you mentioned, Alex, of like, I've exercised so I can have a drink, like that kind of that interplay between how you think about it. Also, I would be really interested to see the comparison from other geographies. Like, I do think that this is a more prevalent thing that I've seen in, say, the UK and the US. But like, if you go to France or Spain, like people don't just go out to drink. Like you don't go you go and have dinner and have a glass of wine. And your dinner lasts 3 hours and your glass of wine lasts 3 hours. It's it'd be very interesting to see what the difference is in different cultures.
Yeah, because as we've just been chatting about here on the show, we're talking about our own cultures, both the US and the UK, where there's pretty strong drinking cultures compared to those other countries. But pretty interesting links there between activity and alcohol consumption. I know personally, sometimes I feel that way. Like, if I go do a hard workout, I'm like, I'm going to have a drink tonight. So makes sense. Another study that they cited also showed that, to that point, individuals tend to drink more on days that they are active. So I think there's kind of that theme of like, I'm rewarding myself after this hard work.
I agree. And then I think, definitely what you said about with that team sport, go down the rugby club after a rugby match, go down the cricket club. Those are like very common things when I was growing up. So, super interesting study to kick us off, but let's move the discussion along because, more and more we're seeing strong evidence, including from the Surgeon General, like from health organizations, saying that alcohol increases your risk of death over time. And a lot of evidence now that there isn't any safe level of alcohol, right? They're showing that it is linked to 11 major cancers, that the studies of just how hard it is for your body to process alcohol. Yet we're still seeing this evidence of people who exercise, so are doing things to look after their body, and drink. So that got us to thinking about that relationship, and also thinking about how you approach drinking alcohol as you age and the impact on your overall fitness.
Yeah, so we're going to look at this from 2 aspects, right, Abbie? We're going to look at like muscle/strength as you age, and then cardiovascular health. So we researched to see what we could find on those 2 subjects.
Yeah, so let's start with muscle. According to a 2023 study from the journal Calcified Tissue International, Alex finds the most amazing journal.
By the way, it's from the UK, I believe, because this was like University of
must get myself a subscription.
Exeter, or I don't remember the exact university, but definitely the people who submitted it were English, and I thought Calcified Tissue International sounded kind of British. It sounds like something you lot would read.
Sounds like a must-have magazine.
Get your subscriptions ready.
Anyway, from that journal, people who consume excessive amounts of alcohol could lose muscle and increase the risk of frailty as they age. This study really looked at people who were having 10 units of alcohol a day. So that's like the equivalent of like a bottle of wine, or like 5 pints of beer, of a lower percentage beer.
Yeah. So this is a British study because they're talking about units of alcohol, but it's
right. It's important because if we talk about drinks like that's where people can like wander into risky habits.
Yeah. So it showed essentially this study that if you're drinking excessively, it has a negative impact on your muscle mass over the time. And we looked around. I couldn't find any research that said that, this was good for your strength as you age, drinking alcohol, which is probably not surprising.
But a shift, right? Because I remember even like 15 years ago, medical professionals saying that like a glass of wine a day was good for you.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. But yeah, no evidence out there that drinking heavily is good for your muscle strength as you age. So don't drink that bottle of wine every day if you want to maintain your muscle mass. Also looked into cardiovascular health, found a study on that. Here's a quote. Actually, I'll just give you the title of the study first. We may not need to delve into the quote from the study once I tell you the title. It's Alcohol and the Aging Cardiovascular System, a Dangerous Synergy Uncovered. Do you think we need the quote after that title? No. It said, quote, the findings reported in this paper convincingly demonstrate that chronic alcohol intake accelerates the biological aging of the heart and vasculature, reduces cardiovascular reserve, and increases the risk of heart failure. Given the widespread prevalence of alcohol use and the global trend towards an aging population, these findings are both timely and clinically significant and should serve as a call on clinicians, researchers, and public health professionals, everyone who talks to you about your health, to recognize alcohol use as a modifiable risk in the aging cardiovascular system.
Interesting. So when we take that research and what we've seen ourselves, too much alcohol is bad for your muscle mass and bad for your cardiovascular health. That's very clear from these studies. So should we stop drinking altogether? Like I said, we're seeing more and more of this happening in society, I think, right? Where people are being, a sober curious movement, a movement away from alcohol. I do think that there's been a real shift in the last few years from it being accepted and as normalized. I think it's still very normalized in society, though.
Yeah, but like you were saying a moment ago, the alcohol industry used to tout, that a little bit of alcohol was good for you. I mean, if you go back in like time to the mid 20th century, it's really prevalent. And then I think it became more of like wine can be good for your heart type of thing. But the amount of wine we're talking about there, speaking of units of alcohol,
it's like a inch and a half, right?
Yeah,
like it's not your
giant glass of wine.
Exactly. But I also think it's really interesting that there has been evidence uncovered in ancient civilizations of them making and processing alcohol. So alcohol is not a new thing. It's not a 20th century thing. But I do wonder, and I think I mentioned this on the last podcast when we touched on this, if we're reaching that point for alcohol that cigarettes had, where it tipped over and suddenly people realized just how negative it was for health.
Yeah, maybe so. And I mean, you and I both had cigarettes when we were younger, and now we wouldn't really ever think of touching one just with the shift, because that was occurring during our kind of early years.
Exactly. Actually. And I remember growing up, it was everywhere. You had people smoking in restaurants and bars and on planes.
And then they started showing pictures of like blackened lungs. And I know even when we go to the UK now, I mean, that it's shifted a lot here, but there they like plaster the cigarettes in the store with like just
you can't
warnings.
Even see them.
You can't see the actual cigarettes. It's just like these plastered warnings. Yeah. So yeah, we may be reaching that, but it's tough for our generation. And we always joke about which generation I'm in. I was kind of on the bubble. I like to identify.
He's a millennial.
No, I like to identify with the Gen X. If you're on the bubble, it's which generation you identify. Look it up. But we grew up with alcohol. We grew up with our parents drinking it. It was around in society. It's really part of our culture, and that's probably why it's so ingrained in our lives. And I think it's difficult to just say like, oh, I'm not gonna do this anymore. I mean, even with like it's changed a lot with work culture, but it used to be ingrained in work culture go back and watch Mad Men, right? And you'll get a sense
one
of how
Alex's favorite shows.
the advertising industry treated alcohol in the 1960s and 70s. But even into like times when we've been working, you have work happy hours. There's sometimes like pressure from that to drink in the past. Not so much now, but yeah, I think it is shifting. It's just difficult to think like, oh, you're going to give up this thing that's so ingrained in culture.
And of course, we're not talking about and deeply recognize that there's people who have issues with alcohol. So we're not touching on that in terms of those who might have alcohol abuse patterns. So putting that to one side, saying, if you have a healthy boundary and relationship with alcohol, like moving away from it totally. I saw a really interesting clip of a health professional from the UK who was talking about what is moderate levels of alcohol, like what does that look like? To your point out earlier, Alex, like what is a unit of alcohol? What does that look like? And her saying that it can be part of a healthy lifestyle if you accept that it has risk associated with it. So you treat it in the same way as you're thinking about things like bacon or like other things that you
we had for breakfast this morning
that you might introduce into your diet. So really like moderating your drinking and making sure that you have healthy boundaries and relationships with it.
Yeah, you got to have bacon once a week, by the way. It's
like maybe once every 2 months.
Yeah, not me. So yeah, it's something we've been thinking about. Are people our age, sort of that like late millennial, early Gen X, are they giving up drinking? I wanted to investigate, and I found a lot of really timely information on this, given the discussion that's going on in society right now. There was a survey that came out just this month. I believe it was from the alcohol industry, but it says, in fact, that people in the generation after us, the boomers, the baby boomers, are actually leading the way when it comes to cutting back or quitting drinking. So this is kind of flying in the face of a lot of the narrative that we've heard recently, where it's like Gen Z are not drinking so much. This is saying that really no, baby boomers are leading the way on this. So I'll quote from an article from the Financial Times, but you have to listen to this closely because this is a interesting metric, the way that they describe this. And I think this may be something that the alcohol industry looks at. So it's looking at, have people consumed alcohol in the past 6 months? I would imagine for folks who are selling alcohol, that's an important metric. They want to see that people are drinking at least within the past 6 months. So this survey said, quote, 71% of boomers, those born between 1946 and 1964, consumed alcohol in the past 6 months. The lowest drinking rate of any generation, and down 2 percentage points from 3 years ago. Yeah, so this is IWSR, a market researcher for the global beverage industry. By contrast, 74% of Gen Z who are at the legal drinking age reported drinking in the past 6 months, up from 66% 3 years ago, as young people in their late teens and 20s catch up with the total adult population drinking rate of 76%. So think about that. The average adult population drinking rate over the past 6 months in the U.S. is 76%. So boomers are down to 71% and Gen Z are up to 74%. So there you go. That kind of flies in the face of that narrative that's been going around.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a gazillion questions you could ask about this survey, because like consumed alcohol, that you could be comparing apples and oranges. I might have had 1 drink in the last 6 months and somebody else might have had 10 drinks a week.
True. Yeah. The other thing that I thought about this was like, it didn't really talk about our generations. So I thought, well, let me search around and see what I can find about Gen X and millennials. And so right before we record this podcast, I found an article from the Wall Street Journal, and the headline was, "Bars are giving up on young people and catering to Gen X instead." So as it turns out, Gen X are the most reliable generation of alcohol consumers, and we love nostalgia theme nights and events that end way before midnight. So based on the information I found here, the narrative is that Gen X are maintaining their drinking habits, but also we don't want to go to bed after midnight, which is like tracking perfectly for our ages at this point. So Gen X, do you think that describes us, Abbie? We still maintain our drinking habits that we've had all our lives, but we don't want to stay up late.
Well, definitely don't want to stay up late, but I think I drink considerably less than I did when I was younger.
Yeah, I didn't take this to mean they were talking about like binge drinking, but just that like people were still regularly, having drinks, whether it's a few cocktails of beer, wine, whatever, a few times a week. So
yeah,
pretty interesting stuff. So it seems like Gen X really hasn't changed much in the way of alcohol consumption, and perhaps there's movement away from it in other generations, even with the boomers, which was surprising to me. But overall, you go through all these surveys and studies and data, and I think it still leads me back to the place of like, probably good to cut down on your alcohol use as much as you can as you age. But like you said, it's a risk and you can work it into your lifestyle in a responsible way. And, I don't know that if you haven't been drinking for most of your life, I wouldn't start up as you age. Like exactly. that's
yeah, no. And I think it's exactly that. Like, like I said, I'm going to start a half marathon training cycle in August. I will massively, not that I drink a lot, but I will probably not drink at all during that training cycle because it just doesn't feel good. Like when you're doing long runs and you're putting that stress on your body, like I want to maximize my recovery. So I probably will, just step away from it for that period of time.
And I'm curious, I'll join you. I'm curious to know, because we've done like the months off, once or twice a year, but I'm curious to know what it feels like not to have alcohol for like 3 months and see.
Yeah. And I really want to see that on this training cycle of like, if I don't have a drink at all, how does that affect my training? Do I recover better?
Yeah. And I mean, you've got all that rich data now. Like if you have a Garmin or an Apple Watch or, one of these fitness devices, you can see when you drink alcohol and how it impacts you. So pretty fascinating stuff. Bottom line, alcohol is not good for you.
Surprise.
Surprise. But, if you're doing it, just try to do it in moderation. And like I said, I think it's really, for some of us, it's probably hard just to think, well, I'm not going to have whiskey again. I mean, I like whiskey. Like it's okay to have it maybe a few times a week and be sensible about it. So there you go.
Absolutely. Well, that's it for this edition of Practically Fit. As always, if you enjoyed the episode, please share it with your friends, your family, anyone, in fact. Don't have to like them, just share the episode or leave us a review or a comment.
Yeah. And again, if you want to share a comment or a story, you can do that via Substack. You can do that on your podcast platform. You can send it to me at alex@practically.fit, and we'll share it on the next episode. So if you've got your thoughts on, alcohol and how it impacts your fitness, or like maybe you're somebody who is giving up alcohol, we'd love to hear your story, or really on anything that we discussed on the podcast today. Abbie, what are we going to talk about on next week's edition of the podcast?
We're going to talk about strength training, where we are on our strength training journey, how we approach strength training, and why it's important to us.
That's right. So join us next time for that. And until then, remember, when it comes to fitness, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be practical.